All right, time now for Angle on America. We take a look at the top stories in the world of American politics, starting today with news that President Donald Trump has retweeted 3 unverified anti-Muslim videos. Let's get to our panel. From Washington, Republican strategist Corey Crowley. And from Iowa City, we're joined by political science professor Timothy Hagel. Thank you both for joining us today.
Glad to be with you, Marilla.
Let's start, Corey, with the videos that were tweeted out, or I guess retweeted by the president, with descriptions like Muslim migrant beats up Dutch boy on crutches. We have to say that it's unclear what these videos are, where they came from, what the source is here, and the president retweeted them. And I mean the original source. We know they came from a British far-right group. But were you shocked by this, or are you just kind of tired of being shocked by Donald Trump?
Well, I think the latter. But, you know, and in the case of the one with the Dutch boy, I read one report earlier today that says it was actually 2 Dutch boys. One just happened to have dark hair and one had light hair.
Nice.
The problem is, you know, when you're the president of the United States, Twitter, that whole world of social media, it's so hard to verify what you read out there. And we all know that. We've seen it. You know, the joking quips attributed to folks like Abraham Lincoln that are quotes about the internet, clearly false, just to prove the point. And when you're the president, you have to have an added degree of scrutiny before you repost these types of things. And I think Donald Trump has just disappointingly shown time and time again that he doesn't have that type of discretion and that he's quick on the trigger. And then he often doubles down and defends these things after the fact. Now, do I think that he was probably trying to create slurs or insults? I don't think so. I think he was trying to further prove his own public policy points against immigration, in favor of his immigration ban, in favor of his wall. He's trying to help double down on his policies. But when you don't verify sources, you end up harming your argument, not hurting it, or hurting it, not helping it.
Okay, so let me turn this over to Timothy and ask him the same thing. Do you agree with Corey that these aren't meant to sort of ignite that kind of sentiment, that they're meant to back his policy as far as Donald Trump is concerned? And also, the president is, when he does things, it adds credence to whatever he is speaking up for or retweeting or standing up for. Or do you think people don't bother to give it credence anymore because it's Donald Trump?
Well, you know, as far as the last part of that, it's a little bit of both. That certainly, to a certain extent, we've come to expect this kind of thing from Donald Trump, but people still get unhappy about it. And that's what we're seeing today, of course, that as Corey was indicating, and I certainly agree, that as the president, we generally expect people to check sources because you are the president. You're not just some random person on Twitter, or even Donald Trump before he became a candidate and eventually president, that you have to check these sorts of things because it does come from an official person, a leader of our government. And so when the president doesn't do that, and, you know, there's no indication that the clips were false necessarily, although where they came from, who he was retweeting, is also a bit of a problem for the president as well. And so these are the kinds of things that basically open him up to criticism, and not just from the opposing party, but even from within his own party, where people just are not happy with the president, who seems to be so lax in terms of his ability to check sources and things of that nature.
Yeah, he doesn't necessarily believe in verifiable information. He believes in what he believes, and anything that seems to support his line of thinking gets put out there, Corey.
Yeah, I think that's right. And, you know, the other big problem this poses is just from a messaging standpoint that Republicans are trying to push through tax reform right now. It's a delicate balance. We saw what happened when Republicans tried to pass through repeal and replacement of Obamacare, and it failed. We need all hands on deck here messaging tax reform, not distracting from that message. We've got about 96 hours to get this through the United States Senate, and the president's completely off on these tangents, distracting the media. And the more and more you do that, the more and more likely it is you lose 2 or 3 more Republicans, which will cause this other huge priority to fail. And then where are we left with our base? I think in a terrible position.
All right, let's get to something else Donald Trump had to say. After the Matt Lauer news came out today, he tweeted about that, saying executives at NBC and Comcast should be fired for putting out so much fake news. He also asked again if NBC will now sack MSNBC chief Phil Griffin. Okay, Timothy, let's turn that one over to you. What did you make about comments? Again, it was sort of a twisting of what the original story was about.
Yeah, with the Matt Lauer thing, of course, he's been accused of some sort of sexual misconduct. I haven't seen any of the details on that yet, but it was certainly serious enough where he got fired very, very quickly. But then President Trump has sort of injected other sorts of things and using the fake news aspect to it. So he's sort of turning it a little bit, but it basically shows from his perspective, his dislike of what he calls the fake news in general, be it, NBC or other news outlets. Of course, CNN is a favorite target of his, and even going after Joe Scarborough and Morning Joe and bringing up some old I don't want to say accusations, but basically an old problem where a staffer of his died when he was a Congress member, and there were some questions about initially that seemed to be settled, and now Trump is bringing that up again. So it sort of muddies the waters in terms of, and getting back to what Corey was saying about messaging, well, this is the messaging aspect of this too, that certainly Trump could come out and say something saying, look, we need to take care of this, although given that Trump's been accused of sexual misconduct himself, he's perhaps not the best messenger for that message.
I was going to say, Corey, do you think he should have just left this particular bit of news alone?
Well, I would. You've got to be at some point self-aware. And I guess we should just assume now that Donald Trump isn't self-aware unless it's high praise of him. That's apparently all his ears can hear. And, there's an old adage about people who live in glass houses not throwing stones. And this president just doesn't get it. But I think it's because he's figured out something that the rest of the world maybe has yet to really fully grasp. And that is that Donald Trump has absolute immunity from his base for doing any wrong at all. And he knows that. The rest of us, I don't think, have come to grips with it. But he's going to play it up to his own advantage probably for the next 3 years.
Timothy, let me ask you about that as well. You mentioned the fact that he's probably not the best one to put out a message on this, but we're probably going to see more cases like this popping up, sexual misconduct allegations. Do you expect the president will just chime in every time?
It's hard to say. That in some respects, I was thinking that perhaps one of the reasons that he decided to chime in today in a variety of topics was to deflect from what was going on yesterday. Maybe this is already forgotten, but his Pocahontas comment, which got a lot of pushback from a variety of sources, not least of which was Senator Warren herself. And so now we're talking about something entirely different. So there's always that sort of new thing along those lines. And so that's why, to some extent, I would, I'm not really sure that it's not that Trump is self-aware, that he just is aware in a different way and has thrown everybody else sort of off their sort of path, saying, okay, this is what we expect. But Trump certainly is not what we would expect from a president under normal circumstances.
Under normal circumstances, which we are not in right now, I dare to say. Corey Crowley and Timothy Hagel, thank you both for joining us today. Appreciate that.
My pleasure.
You bet. Thanks a lot.